Hey, good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Glad you guys are joining me for Process Thursday. If you're new around here, well, what I do on Thursdays is I build processes for my business and others. So if you have a process that you want me to help you build out, well, then email it to me. But I do require that you have a swim lane made out to make our lives easier. So do the swim lane, and I'll show you. I'm not going to draw a swim lane tonight, but we'll talk more about that this evening. A couple of weeks ago, I built a process that would allow sellers to basically go to my website and put in have a form there that would put in information that would allow them to accept the offer. So they had to put in some information. I'm going to show you the form here in a second. They had to put in some information, and then we built some workflows in there. And what I wanted to do tonight is I wanted to go a little bit deeper in there to help build out some of the communication back to the sellers. Because what happens in my company is, we start due diligence. Well, I want the seller to know we've started due diligence on your property. When it's been due diligence is complete, I want them to know due diligence is complete. The next step, I want to kind of keep the seller involved with what's going on. And that will require less email communication back and forth between my intake managers and, of course, the seller. So that's the goal for tonight. Now, again, if you're new here, I appreciate you joining. This is a work session for my business, and I'm hoping that you can kind of learn watching what I'm doing and learning on how I build these processes. But every week I go through the same 7 steps. I'm going to share the 7 steps with you in order to help you understand or see exactly kind of what happens, the process that I go through, the recipe. I like recipes. There's my cake box. I like recipes. So let's go back and let's start looking at this recipe, okay? So here's the 7 steps that I follow to build bulletproof workflows. These are the same 7 steps each and every time, okay? So once we go through, if I can get my mouse over to where it needs to be, there it goes. Step number 1 is find the pain point. I'm a big believer in finding the pain point. I find the pain point to help me understand what the first thing I should outsource is. What's the first thing to outsource? The thing that you can't stand to do anymore. Like, I hate this thing. I'm never doing it again. That's the pain point that you do or use for outsourcing your work. Well, what's the pain point to help you with your workflows? It's the same thing. It's the bottlenecks in your business. When you get these bottlenecks, you got to bust through them. That's the pain point to me. So when things are annoying to me or I kind of get annoyed with it, that's what I go work on. And I've followed the same thing since 2015 when I started building processes, this same kind of recipe. So step 1, find the pain point. Step number 2, I'm going to skip over that one. Step number 2, because it's just a work page, it's a workbook. I'm not going to do the workbook tonight. Step number 2 is to draw out the process. Well, what do I mean by that? What I mean is sit down with swim lanes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, well, look, here's a swim lane chart, and I've got classes on swim lanes that you can watch. But basically what I'm doing here is I want to sit down and map out the process. What is the process that I'm trying to fix here? Well, in this case, it's the seller accepting the offer. And a couple weeks ago, I drew out this piece. Whenever you're building workflows, it's so exciting just to jump in and start to do something like, oh man, I got to start building these workflows, or I got to start building these processes. But the reality is that is the wrong step. The first thing that you should do is find the pain point, sit down with a piece of paper and map out what's broken. And not just the current state. I want you to draw out the future state. What does the future state look like? This process map becomes the blueprint of your entire workflow. This is the thing that helps you understand what you're drawing. And the analogy that I always use is if you were going to build a house, you just wouldn't back the concrete truck up and say, well, let's just dump some concrete here. What do? The first thing that you do when you go to build a house is you have a blueprint. You sit down and you draw it out. This is what it's going to look like. This is what this goes here. And then you bring in all the materials to start building a house. Same thing with workflows and processes. You got to map it out, because otherwise whatever you're working on is just going to be an absolute train wreck. Step number 3 is once you have that mapped out, you really have to think about the deliverables. Well, what are the deliverables like what is it that this process should come out with? The best analogy I have on this one is if you think about like anything that's manufactured, like a car, for example. You have a car that's manufactured, the raw materials come in, and then what comes out on the other side is a car. That's the deliverable. Now, we're not making cars, but every part of the process should have a defined deliverable. This process that we're going to build tonight was really, again, when I built this a few weeks ago, and you can find all of these on processmoto.com/universe, and they're coming up, by the way. They're getting updated. They're behind. But essentially, when you look at these things in this process, what I want the seller to be able to accept my offer. I always say 4 ways, but now the 5th way, which is to go to my website and put in some information, and boom, they have the workflow kicking off, going to the intake manager, and then we start our due diligence, etc. So this is the deliverable. What's the deliverable in this case? I want communication back to the seller. That's my deliverable. We have to identify what we want as our inputs. Now, every workflow is essentially a form. That's really everything that it is. If you think about any company that you've ever worked for example, they go and, it's paperwork that walks all around these different departments. Everything is a piece of paper. Everything is just data. So how do we capture data? We have to identify the inputs. What data do I need to collect? I'm going to show you what data we're collecting on the seller process tonight. I'll show you what we're doing, and then you'll see how we build additional workflows into this system. We have to think about the trigger. What is the trigger here? And every process starts with a trigger. The trigger might be an email from a seller. It could be a day of the week or day of the month. That could be a trigger. Another trigger could be another workflow, for example. So there's many different ways that we can trigger things, but we have to identify what is the start of this process. Tonight's process is starting when a seller accepts the offer. So that's the trigger. And tonight's easy because, we've already done it. Then after you have all of this information built and identified, then we go build the workflow. And see, that's the mistake that people make. They try to build a recipe. They try to go build a process. Like, I'm going to go build this process. And then they spend hours and hours and hours building processes and documenting things when, in fact, you build the workflow after you've got it all mapped out, just like a house. It makes it go a lot faster. And then step 7 here is that we have to go and continuously monitor that process, right? Like, we want to go and test it. We want to revise it. And that's what's happening tonight. Manager, step number 7. I've seen some things. We've put this process from a few weeks ago. We've put it into play. I've watched it, and I'm saying now we need to revise it. And this is what you're going to see tonight is that we're going to revise this workflow to make it even better. So that's our goal for this evening. So what is this process again? I'm going to tell you one more time. The process is that what we're doing is we're allowing our sellers to accept our offer via the web. Okay, so that's what we're doing. And let me just hit this screen. There we go. And what we're going to do here is, let me see if I can pull up. I actually put it on I put this form on my website last month, and I was going to see if I had that. I didn't pull that up in advance of tonight's session because I was also going to show you the public form that we used. But let me just see if I can pull this up real quick because unless I deleted it. I might have deleted it. Did I? I think I did. Okay, we actually did delete it. So let me show you what we did. Let me just move this over here. There we go. And let me bring this screen up for you. Okay, so this is what you're looking at right now. This is process mode, okay? So this is the, here I am. I'm in my inbox right here. And in this inbox, this is where my workflow is right here. And you'll see the workflow inbox. And what's happening here is that whenever you have your own ProcessModo account, you'll see up in the URL that the URL is in fact for your company. And it's a custom URL, so every company gets their own URL. You can customize that. Every employee or every user of ProcessModo has their own inbox, and this is my inbox, and you can see I'm a little bit behind here. So essentially, this is my inbox, and what we did was a few weeks ago, we created this form, and this form is basically the seller intake form. And what's happening on this seller intake form is that we're asking the seller to put in their name, first name, last name, their email address, their phone number. Did we send you an offer letter? And you'll see that the default there is yes, and it says offer ID number. We also built in some conditional options that says, did we send you an offer letter? No. And if they say no, well, then we want them to add information about the property, like, okay, what state is the property in? What county? What is the APN number? So this is the form that we already created. So assuming that we did send them an offer letter, it's going to say, okay, what's the offer ID number? And by the way, do you have additional properties that you wanted to sell? And if they say yes, well, then this same table comes up like, here's some additional properties that I want to sell. And as a result, we start to collect multiple pieces of data. And then after they add all of this, they say, yes, I want to sell my property. They hit submit, and all of a sudden it's submitted into our workflow to the intake manager. Now, the other thing that we did, now you'll notice that this is on a ProcessModo public page, a public post. So basically what's happening here is I could give this URL to the seller, or I could put it in my offer letter. They could come here and insert all of the information. It comes right into my workflows. The other thing that I could do is I could use iframe, which is an option. I could take an iframe, for example, and I could come down here to settings, and I don't think I have one set up for this, is iframe right here. I can come to iframe, and yep, I did have it set up. So I hit iframe, and basically this is the code that I would put onto my website to allow the sellers to be able to populate the information from my own website without having even to go to ProcessModo. Now, let's look at the workflows that we've created. And in this case, I'm going to come over here to workflow and hit workflow. And you'll see that we really only have one piece of workflow created. And if I look at this flow chart, for example, this is showing me that we start the process. It's going to go to the intake manager. The intake manager is going to approve it or reject it. So basically, if it's approved, well, then it's done. And if it's rejected, then it's done either way. Okay, so we're either going to approve it or reject it. But what we're going to do is let's look at the actual work that's being done here. So I can come over here and let me just hit edit, for example. And when I'm looking at the edit here, what this is telling me is that this is basically an approval piece. So the intake manager is getting a notification that says, hey, somebody has uploaded this property. And I just want to make one change for tonight here. Let's just say I want to change this. There we go. I'm going to make that change for tonight. So basically what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, new property intake, here's the URL number, and it's basically saying that a new intake has been submitted, and it's providing an email with all of the fields in here, and it's allowing them to look at it and then either approve it or deny it. Okay, so that's what's happening here. Now, as you can imagine, that's not really the whole workflow, right? Like the whole workflow is more than that, because what happens after they approve it, then it starts due diligence. And typically what's happening in my business today is that they're taking this new property and they're going into LG Pass, and they're saying, here's the properties. They're either looking them up in LG Pass or they're adding them. Okay, if we want to move forward, they're adding them through the mailing record, etc. Then they're taking it and they're triggering the due diligence. But wouldn't it be nice if I had the ability to kind of move it through the stage and say, hey, fire this email back to the seller when we've accepted it, or fire this email back when we've moved it into due diligence, or fire this when we've moved it into closing, so that we can kind of communicate to the sellers along the way what's happening in the process. This is going to save my intake team a lot of time, because today they look at it and they're responding, responding, they're typing emails, and then they send it back to the intake manager or to the seller. Then, they update them again. We're running like a FedEx delivery over here, where we're trying to update people along the way, but we're doing a terrible job of it. And we can do a lot better through an automated system, right? And this is what Process Thursday is about. It's about building automated systems to free up my team. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. Now, I have this form already created. I don't need to go recreate another form. And I have a workflow already created. I don't need to go create another form. What I need to do is I need to create some notification points. So in a way, what I need to do is I need to add kind of like a status on that form. And the reason I need to add that status form on the form is so that we can do the drop down to the different stages. And then I need to trigger some emails around it. Now, I have to just give you a word of caution here. One of the things that's going to happen tonight is this is a real work session, okay? I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to do. I kind of have an idea of how I'm going to make it happen. At the same time, I'm going to trip and stumble and say, well, that didn't work. So I kind of have an idea, and that's the thing about automation is you kind of have to get in there, get your hands dirty a little bit, and make some mistakes, hit some dead ends. And when you do that, you'll get better, right? But I got to tell you something. I think I know how to do this, but at the same time, I have a lot of self-doubt that maybe the way I'm going to do it may not work. And that's okay. So if you guys see me struggling and you can solve the problem because you're a Process Moto user, chime in. Tell me in the chat, do this. If you can see a way that I can improve this process even better, chime in. I want to hear from you in the chat. All right. Okay, let's get going. And this is a live broadcast. And the thing about live broadcasts is, man, you got to hope the internet works. So a lot of nerds going on right here. Let's see what happens. Okay. Back to the screen. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go back to the actual form. So right now I'm, in the workflow step, and I'm going to come back over here to the form, and it's going to say, you want to leave? Yeah, I do want to leave, even though I should have made the change to that thing. It's okay. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to add a status. Well, that status is going to be a drop down. And these are my fields over on the right side. And if I scroll down here, you'll see it says that a drop down has been added. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm just going to call it status. There we go. And this is going to give me some options. Okay, so, what are my statuses? Okay, declined. That's one that we want to, here, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say select one, and one. And let's see, declined, approved. Let's add a few on here. That's going to be for due diligence, and that's going to be for closing. We'll do one more. So this is going to say due diligence start. This one's going to say due diligence under review. This is going to say closing started. I'm going to do one more that's going to say deed received. So basically what's going to happen here is when we mark deed received, that means that we've gotten it back from the seller. And I guess I could do one more that says deed recorded. Let's try that one. Okay. So the thing is that I don't want the sellers to see this when they're on this form, this intake form over here. I don't want them to see this field down here. This should be kind of an internal field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this as an administrative field. So that means you have to be logged in order to see it. Okay, so I've got to be logged in order to see it. And once I'm logged in here, I'll be good there. So I'm going to go ahead and update this field. Of course, I've got this updated. And let's see, I'm going to come back over here to the workflows settings. So I'm going to come to workflows and settings. And we're going to go to, let's just come back into this one for a second, because what I want to do is I want to change the user here over to this admin where I'm logged in. That's fine. Okay. And then what we want to do here is the rest of this is fine for tonight. Let's see. That's fine. So let's just go ahead and hit update. Oh, I saw one change I want to make. What I said in the previous communication was, hey, no, that's right. Okay, so if it's approved, next step is to move into the list. That's fine. Okay, so we're good there. Okay, let's keep going. We're going to come back over to workflow, and we're going to do add a new step. Okay. And what we're going to do here is we're going to call this one notify seller and due diligence started. Okay, and this is going to be a notification. There's no action that needs to be taken. It's just a notification. And what we're going to do is we're going to put down that we want to send it to the seller's email address. So that's my option. I can notify the admin or the seller, but there is a condition on this. And the condition's saying, hey, if something's not met, then don't do it. In this case, what I'm going to say is if the status right here, status, right here, this status right there, if the status is due diligence started, see, so what I'm doing is I'm saying, look, only execute this thing if due diligence has been started. That's it. So we're going to come down here and that's fine. What I'm not seeing right here is the ability for me to send that email. All right, so what is this workflow notification? Enable this setting to do an email. There we go. That's what I was missing. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to scroll down to the bottom because we're going to email the seller, and we're going to put update on your property. And I always like to put something unique in here. And the reason I like to put something unique is because if they're using Gmail or something else and they get a subject like that, we want to have something that's unique to them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, we're going to use, that's not, I don't want to use offer ID number because that could be They may not have submitted that. Embed, here we go. We're going to do the entry ID. That's what I'm going to use. And for the email, we're going to say hello, and then I want to put their first name. Now, how did I get their first name? Well, I got their first name because when they submitted the form, it was on there. Hello, John. I wanted to let you know that we have started due diligence on your land, and the results should be back in 5 to 7 days. Now, typically due diligence takes less than that, but basically I want to kind of leave myself an open window, give me a little bit of time, and we'll see what happens. And then I'll say something like, should you need to contact us, please call me at, I'll change that phone number later. Thank you, Scott. Okay. It'd be helpful if I spelled my name right. There we go. All right. So there I have an email to the seller and basically telling them that their due diligence has been started. And really there's nothing more to do here. So you'll see that the next thing that I want to do is I want to move it to the next workflow. And what we're going to do here is, see, now I'm starting to think like, I'm starting to wonder, like if I move it to the next workflow and I get to the next workflow, is it going to, is it really going to fire, or when it gets to the next workflow and it's a conditional, will it skip it? Like that's the, I'm not sure that it will hold it, I guess is what I'm saying. So my original thought process here might be a little skewed, okay? Because what I was going to do is I was going to have them change the status and then have them change the status and then the email gets fired. And then if they change the status again, the email gets fired. But the problem with that is that, in doing so, once that first email is fired, it will move to the next workflow. And if the next workflow doesn't meet the condition, it will move to the next workflow. It won't hold unless I built in some time frames, which I don't want the time frames to go in there. So basically what I think I have to do is I think I need to kind of have, now that I'm thinking it through, what I probably need to have is a series of checkboxes. And what those checkboxes will do is it will allow the intake manager to say, check due diligence is started. And when that gets done, then it fires the notification. Check due diligence is complete. And then you see, like, I think I've got to break, instead of having one massive drop down, I think I have to add individual pieces. And like I said, this is a live working session. And this is what you're going to have when you're working through your processes. You're going to think you're going to go one way, and then you'll realize, like, well, that's not going to work. So let's just go back. We're going to backtrack. Okay, so I'm going to change course now. All right, let's go back and change course. And again, if you guys see a better way, let me know, because I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. All right, here we go. Let's go back over here, and I'm going to go back to the form. So the form, I actually have it. Nope, I don't have it there. Don't have it there, so I have it right here. I'm going to come back over to the edit. And on the edit, I'm going to get rid of the status. So let me just nix the status. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a series of, let's just use these checkboxes. All right, I'm just going to add one checkbox here, and I'll show you why I'm going to do this. I could sit there and add a bunch more, but we're going to have to do a couple things here. So the first one that we're going to do is we're going to say due diligence start. Okay, due diligence start. And I'm going to take these off. I'm only going to have one on there. And I'm just going to say yes. Start. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, remember I told you that I didn't want this available just on the general form. So I wanted this only if they're logged in. So that's where the administrative comes in. So now that I have that, what I'm going to do is, you see, I've got the form set up basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here and duplicate this. This is going to save me a lot of steps. So this is going to be due diligence complete. The next one's going to be closing process has started. The next one's going to be deed received. And the next one's going to be deed recorded. So that's what we have. So I'm going to come down here. I'm just going to start changing these things. So this one was due diligence complete. And then the next one is, instead of due diligence start, the next one's going to be closing started. The next one's going to be deed received. And the last one's going to be deed recorded. Okay, I like this one better. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to hit update on the form. So we're going to update this form here. Now we got that going. All that's looking good. Okay, let's go back to our workflows here. So I'm going to come back over to the workflow. And I'm going to edit this thing. So we're going to edit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that where I have it. And I still want the email notification, but the condition's going to change. Okay, so up here, what we're going to do is we're going to say condition this step if and you'll see like this, the field that we had it on is gone because we deleted it, so it defaulted. So I'm going to say if due diligence start is yes, all that's going to remain the same. I'm going to hit update this step. Okay, so if due diligence start as yes, then go. I think I'm in the same boat now that I'm thinking about it, because the minute that notification triggers, it's going to trigger to the next step. So what I need to do is I need to change that whole notification even slightly. Instead of notifying the seller, which I need to do, what I need to do is I need to let the intake manager be able to update. That's what I need to do, is I need to be able to allow them to update the step. So watch how I'm going to change this. It's live. What can I say? So instead of being a notification, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this as a user input. And it may not let me make that user input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and copy this email. Copy. And I'm going to get rid of this thing. So I'm going to come back over to workflow. And I'm going to delete this thing, delete it. And we're going to come over here, we're going to add a new workflow. The new workflow is going to say due diligence start. And what we're going to do is we are going to send a user input. And on that user input, what we're going to do is we're going to say, allow me, who's the admin, to do this. And what we're going to do is we're not going to put a condition on it. Condition logic. Enable field condition logic, that's fine. What we're going to do is we're not going to send an email to the intake manager. What we're going to do is we're going to send an email to the seller. And we're going to say, update on your land. Due diligence. Started. And then for the actual body of the email, what we're going to do is we're just going to paste that in there. Now, this is using, what's happening here is I'm using the system a little bit different, because what you'll notice is that it's saying send an email to the person that this is assigned to. Well, the work is being assigned to the intake manager, but the email is going to go to the seller. So the seller is just going to get an email. There's not going to be a link back saying, come do the work and do all of this. And the intake manager is also not going to get an email, because what's going to happen is when the intake manager gets that, it's just going to show up in the box, right? Like it's going to show up in the box that it needs to be moved. So essentially, we're not going to notify, the only person that we're really notifying here is the seller. So we're kind of tricking the system a little bit, because basically I don't want the work to move until the next step happens. So that's what's happening here, okay? So that's why I'm kind of tricking the system. So we're saying we're going to send an email to the seller. And that's the seller's email address. That's what we're doing. Okay. So that email looks good. And when it's done, move it to the next step. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here to the workflows. And over here at the workflows, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate. See this? I don't have to redo this whole thing. I'm just going to hit duplicate. And by duplicating, I've already got, since this is all communication, I just need to come in here and keep moving. Okay, like I can make my workflow go a lot easier simply by coming over here and, copying some of the work. So all that looks good. All that looks good. And for the email communication, it's going to say update on your land, due diligence complete. Now, I'm skipping my rule here because normally I like to have like I told you, like the inbox information or something, or the ID number, but I'm skipping that, okay? I want to let you know that we have completed. Due diligence on your land. And it is currently in review. I expect the review to be completed in, what do we say, 5 to 7 days? No. In the next 2 business days. What I have found is that sellers they're in a hurry to sell the land. They want to know, but you know what they want more than anything? They want communication back, right? Like whether it takes 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, once the offer comes back, even though it has a deadline that says, I will close by this day, that's garbage to me. Okay, like I control the closing process at this point. What are they going to do? Sell it to you? I mean, maybe. I doubt it, right? Like they've gone down the boat. They've invested 5, 7 days, no problem. I'm going to take up to 2 days to review it. Why? Because, well, if somebody's not there, or they're out on the boat, or they're living life, I don't want them to feel like they got to rush 9 to 5. So this is why we're doing this one component. We're giving ourselves time, and by giving ourselves time, it's helping. It's only going to help us. So again, if you have questions, whatever, that looks good. Move on to the next step. I'm going to hit save. Now, it's complete. Okay. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to copy this one. I love being able to copy. I'm going to edit. And while I'm going to edit, we're going to call this one closing started. And for the email, I'm going to say update on your land. Good news. No. Great news. I want to let you know that we have approved the purchase. We have started the closing process, and you should receive your deed via email in the next 24 hours. Oh, look, I had a mistake on the other one. It's all right, we'll fix it. There's that. Boom. Change process. To receive email in the next 24 hours. Okay, that looks good. I'm happy with that. Going to come down here, hit approve or next step. So the next step is going to go back to the workflow, and the next one's going to say that we've received your deed. Because you see, what's going to happen now, what's happening now is that after this goes out, or once it gets approved for approval, we're going to go in and we're going to start to create the deed. Well, the next communication is coming from the intake manager in email saying, here's your deed. Could I build this into a process modo? I could. I could put a field there that says, here's the deed, and then it emails the deed over. We're still going to keep this internal because I want the intake manager to manage this component of it. So that's why we're doing that. Okay. The next step is we're going to edit this one. And in editing this one, we're going to keep it all the same. See, I'm just copying. All I'm doing here is changing my emails. We have received your deed. Just want to let you know. Let's see, I just want to let you know that we have received your deed, and we will start the process to get you paid. Now, what I don't do is let's see, paid. You should hear from us in the next 24 hours. All that looks good. Now, I'm going to hit save here, and I'll show you what we're going to do, or explain what I'm going to do here. So what's happening here is that when we get the deed back, okay, when I get the deed back, what I'm doing is we're recording the deed, but we don't tell them, well, you're going to get paid once we get this thing recorded, and it's in my name, which scares people. It would scare me to know that, like, oh my gosh, they're going to take the land and never pay me. It freaks people out. Now, what I tell them is, look, we're going to get your deed. We're going to review it, and as long as it's signed, notarized, and approved by the county, as long as it's signed, sealed, and approved by the county, I don't say by the county, as long as it's signed, sealed, signed, notarized, and approved, then we will process your payment. People are like, oh, okay. Now, I'm recording the deed. Who's the approval? The county. Once it's recorded in the county, now, one of the questions I'm asked all the time is, well, Scott, what if, the county approves it, like they record it, okay? And then it goes through and it gets rejected by the county assessor's office. Does that ever happen? Yeah, there's a thing that happens. And, is it common? I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And we expect them to work with us. I've never had a seller not work with me. I will tell you, though, there's been some sellers that they drag their feet. Well, it means I got to go get it notarized again. So you know what we do? We bribe them. Hey, buddy, listen, go get the thing notarized and I'll pay you $50, or I'll send the notary out there. If it's messed up in some way that I messed it up, we'll get it fixed, right? People will always respond to a couple more bucks. Here, In fact, we got a check that we're sending out tomorrow for a guy because we had to pay him $50 to go get something notarized, re-notarized again. So we had to go pay him $50 and he's happy. Okay, he's happy. He made $50 and life goes on. I've never had a seller not work with me, ever. In like thousands of deals, never. Will it happen? Might happen. Hopefully not, but I expect that it might happen someday. Okay, so deed at this point, we have it back. And then the last thing that we're going to do, I didn't change the title of that one. Let me change the title of this one. This is deed received. I'll hit save. And then I'm going to come down here to workflow one more time and copy this yet again. I'm going to edit this one, and this one's going to be called deed recorded. And down here, I'm going to say update on your land. We are processing your payment. Wanted to let you know that we have approved the deed and your payment is being processed. Okay, there we go. Hit update. One little tweak in the process. I had this genius idea, and you see, like, it comes down to like hit or miss. We're going to try it. And honestly, we're going to try this thing, and will it work? I think it will. Will it be awkward? Maybe. We're going to see what happens. All right. So what I need to do here is I need to bring up my email, but what I want to do is you're going to see me look away here for a second because I'm going to bring up my email over here, but I don't want to like sit here and log in with you. And what we're going to do is I'm going to come over here. There we go. And I'm going to come to this email address. Okay. This one. Sign in. Okay. I think we're good to go. Let me come over here to important maybe. And all right, let's see what we got here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to process this. We're going to come over here and we're going to do this form. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit refresh on this form just to make sure. And this is exactly what we saw, right? I did not see all of those extra fields. Didn't see them popping up or anything like that. And that is definitely a good thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and I'm going to start the process. So who am I? I'm going to put Scott. I'm going to put Scott Seller in here. I'm going to use this email address, my phone number. Did you receive a mailing? Yes. And I'm just going to type in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do you have other properties to sell? No. I already know that works. And I'm going to hit submit. Okay. So thanks for contacting us. Again, this is a custom message that I can put in there. And what's going to happen is on my dashboard here, I should see seller intake right here. So here it is. So here's my seller intake, Scott Seller, all of this looks good. And what I'm going to do is okay, so here's what I'm seeing and here's what I'm thinking. And here's my pause for a minute. So, those fields that I added, those check boxes? Well, I really didn't need to do that, honestly, because as I'm looking here at the options, you'll see here this and say, as I'm looking at the options, I already had that in there. I don't know why I didn't think of this. And here, let me show you. You see, here's what's happening is it's asking the intake manager, this process now is asking the intake manager to approve this. And when the intake manager approves this, well, then it's going to move on to the next step. But essentially, all I need to do here is I can control this whole thing under the admin panel. And I can move this now to due diligence start. You see, I didn't need to put in all of this. I made extra work for myself. All I had to do was do the workflows, and this stuff would have been there. All right. So as the manager or as the intake manager, all I have to do now is just move this to the due diligence start. And what will happen is in process modo, it will move it to that next step and hold, and then move it to the next step and hold. So all I have to do is use this, the workflow dropdown, as opposed to other fields I didn't need. Again, I'm doing this live. I didn't pre-plan this thing. It's an aha moment for me too. So let's just work it and see what happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to move it to due diligence start, and I'm going to hit apply. So now what's happening is if I come back here to like the status, for example, I can see that this form that was submitted was just now submitted over here, and it's in due diligence start. Okay, so that means that I should have received an email, and I did. Here it is. I want to let you know that we have started due diligence on your land. We'll be back to you in 5 to 7 days. So that worked as I expected it to. So we're moving, right? Like this is off to the races. So now they can come in here and choose up the property again. And of course, you know, they can search by this stuff. They can search by the seller's name, etc. And then when I'm ready to move it to the next step, well, the next step is, well, it's telling me right here. See, it's already in the status that it's in. The only next step I could do is right here, due diligence complete. So if I come over here and hit due diligence complete, or I hit apply, well, then what I should have here is I should have an email. What did I just do? I should have an email up here, right there. There it is. Just want to let you know. Oh, wait, that's the one we just looked at. Hold on a minute. There we go. Here's the next one. I want to let you know that your due diligence has been completed. There's the mistake I made. I put days in there twice. I should edit that. So, of course, they got the update. Perfect. Now let's go back. And when they're ready to move it, they can come back over to status. They can search for it, find it. And now we want to move this one. We want to move it to the next step, which is closing has started. They're going to hit apply. I'm going to come back to me just for 1 second while I check this email. It's going to take just a second. There it is. Subject says, update on your land. Great news. I want to let you know that we have approved the purchase of your land. So this is moving perfectly. And again, like I said, I didn't even need these boxes here. I mean, could have just done this. Due diligence, where are we? Due diligence has been completed. And now we're going to say, let me hit status again. Come back to this one. It's in closing started stage. So the next one's, so this email saying we've started the closing process and you should receive your deed. So they received the deed. Now we're waiting on them to give us back the deed. So then what's going to happen is when we get the deed back, we're going to say, hey, we got the deed back on this one. And it fired off another email. I'm going to come back to me just for my email component of it. There we go. Back to the email. Update on your email. We received your deed. There we go. So that's fine. Then the next step is going to say we're waiting on the county to get it back to us. So once the county gets it back to us, we're going to hit deed recorded. We're going to hit apply. That should generate another email to me. So let's just go back to my email for a second. It's coming. There it is. Update on your land. We're processing your payment. We'll let you know we've approved the deed and your payment is being processed. There we go. We've done it. Now, I made too much work for myself. I didn't plan this thing out. Everything I told you to do, draw the blueprint. I didn't draw the even if I would have drawn the blueprint, I still wouldn't have. I had to go get my hands dirty. Okay. One thing I want to show you that is this, and this is a piece that I love about. I love this about Process Modo, is that what I have the ability to do is I have the ability to get really in time and real time reporting. I can come in here and I can look at processes and the processes that are working, the processes that are broken, where the bottlenecks are. And what you'll notice here is like this is the process that we just worked on, okay, seller intake. And I have this sorted by month, but if I do this by step, for example, and say all the steps, what this will do is this is going to show me really all of the steps in the process. Now, what hasn't happened yet, because this is what's bad, is on that status, on this one right here, see it's in the deed recording stage, but now what we need to do is we need to move this to complete. And the only way I can do that, Okay, so one of the mistakes here is that there's no way that, see, it's going to stay here in this deed recorded status, and that's wrong, because what should happen is it should just close out, and my number should be reported over there. So what I'm going to do is I do want to fix something here. Okay, so what we're going to do is before we give up for the night, the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to assign this one to both the admin user, which is me, but this is where my intake manager would come in. The last one is going to be assigned to the admin user, and they get the email. The email goes to the seller. This is what I should have done. I'll let you know your payment, your process. That looks fine. Because what should happen here is that the intake manager, it should, when it's finished, it should come up here on their dashboard, and then they should just hit closed. And again, here's a timeline of everything that happened and when it happened. So the intake manager should be able to come up here and just hit submit that it's finished. And in doing so, that will complete the workflow, because without doing that step, the workflow would not have been completed. And now what will happen is when I look at the reporting here, when I go back up to reports, for example, and I drop down on that seller intake process by step, for example, and look at all the steps. Not sure why the steps that we added tonight didn't populate in here. I need to look into that, because essentially we added more steps and it didn't populate that way. But essentially what should happen is I can get reporting on all of this information. I can find out where my bottlenecks are. I can show how many of these have been completed versus non-completed. I can show how long the duration was. And this is management, right? Like this is what's happening when you're managing a process, is you can go back in and look at reporting, look at the bottlenecks and figure out what's working, why is it working, or what's not working. And then from there, you can go in and just build bulletproof processes. And that's the goal, is to build bulletproof processes. So there's still some tweaking I need to do on this one. Hopefully you saw some of the workflow ideas that we've generated tonight. These workflows are available to all Process Modo users simply by going to processmodo.com/universe. When you're there, what will happen is once you're a user, you can log in, you can download the actual form with the workflows and then upload them into your Process Modo account. And in doing so, you can build your processes quicker and your workflows, because then instead of having to start from scratch, I'm building all the forms for you. All you got to do is like upload and tweak. You're like, I don't want that. I want this. And you make it to your own. But honestly, this entire business is almost processed out, right? Like we're almost done, because we're tackling some of the mundane stuff now. The heavy lifting is there. So if you want to start building processes for your business, go to processmodo.com and /pricing and create an account and start generating. Otherwise, you're welcome to take the knowledge you have from tonight and go and start to build your own processes. I just have one request though. Do me a favor. In the lower right-hand corner, there's that subscribe button. When we end tonight, please subscribe to this channel. I've got more useful content coming for you. I've got a series coming on literally building passive income from $100. So that's a process series that's coming up. And some other cool options for you. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button. And I appreciate you joining me tonight as we explored processes and building some processes for my business. I hope you got value out of it. With that, I hope you have a nice evening, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care. Good night.